Knox Halstead's fingers tightened around the steering wheel as he glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. Arlen sat quietly in the back seat, his small hand pressed against his temple. Eyes squeezed shut. Headache again, buddy? Knox asked, keeping his voice casual. Arlen nodded slightly, wincing with a movement. It burns, Dad. Like something hot behind my eyes. Knox pulled into their driveway, a modest ranch-style house on the outskirts of Brookridge. The April rain peppered the windshield, matching his darkening mood. Something was not right. He'd been watching his son too carefully to miss the signs, the eye twitches, the moments of confusion, the way Arlen sometimes stopped mid-sentence as if his thoughts had suddenly scattered. Inside, Mary was unloading groceries, her movements efficient but distant. Knox had noticed the growing coldness between them lately, like a slow freeze creeping through their foundation. Arlen's got another headache, Knox said, helping his son settle onto the couch with a blanket. Mary barely looked up. It's all that screen time. I've told you both 100 times. He barely watches anything, Mary. Knox kept his voice even, but firm. He'd learned discipline in the Marines, learned to control his reactions, even when everything inside him wanted to explode. He reads books, plays outside. This is not normal. Mary sighed, setting down a carton of milk with more force than necessary. Every kid gets headaches. Knox stopped treating him like he's made of glass. Knox felt the familiar burn of frustration. Mary had changed over the years, or maybe she'd always been this way, and he'd been too blinded by love to notice. These days, she seemed increasingly impatient with both him and Arlen, as if their small-town life was a cage she could not wait to escape. I'm taking him to see someone. Knox decided not bothering to frame it as a question. Tomorrow, waste of money, Mary muttered, but did not argue further. Knox knelt beside Arlen, who had curled up with his favorite book but was not reading it. Instead, he stared at a single spot on the wall, his eyes unfocused. Hey, champ, Knox said softly. Can you look at me for a second? Arlen's eyes slowly turned to his father's face, but the delay was noticeable. Too long. Wrong. Does her head hurt right now? Arlen nodded. It comes and goes. Sometimes everything gets blurry, and I feel, he frowned, searching for words beyond his 8-year-old vocabulary. Like I'm underwater, far away from everything. Knox felt a cold, not form in his stomach. He'd seen combat trauma, had buddies who suffered concussions and brain injuries. This was a normal childhood stuff. This was neurological. We're going to fix this. Knox promised, ruffling his son's hair gently, no matter what it takes. The next morning, Arlen seemed better. The headache had faded, and he ate his breakfast with normal 8-year-old enthusiasm. But Knox did not lower his guard. He'd learned in the Marines that the quiet moments were often the most dangerous. Hey, buddy. Knox said as he drove Arlen to school, I made an appointment for you to get a haircut with Darla after school today. That sound okay? Arlen shrugged. Sure, Dad, my hair is getting kind of long anyway. Knox watched his son bounce out of the car toward the elementary school building, apparently carefree. But he could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. And his instincts had saved his life too many times to ignore them now. Darla Reeves had been cutting hair in Brookridge for over 30 years. The bell jingled as Knox pushed open the door, Arlen trailing behind him. The familiar smell of aftershave and talcum powder filled the air. Well, look who it is, Darla said, her gravelly voice warm with affection. The Halstead men, right on time. Knox settled into one of the waiting chairs while Arlen climbed into the barber's seat. Darla placed a booster cushion for him and draped the cape around his small shoulders. How's business? Knox asked, picking up a tattered sports magazine. Steady as she goes, Darla replied, combing through Arlen's dark hair, not getting rich, but keeping the lights on. How's the debt project over at the Wilson's place coming along? Knox launched into a description of his current contracting job, watching as Darla began carefully trimming Arlen's hair. There was something comforting about the routine of it, the snip of scissors. The gentle way Darla turned Arlen's head, the murmur of casual conversation, that illusion shattered when Darla suddenly stopped, scissors frozen mid-cut. She was staring at a spot near the base of Arlen's skull, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Arlen, honey, did you hit your head recently?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Arlen shook his head. "No, ma. Darla looked at Knox, her eyes communicating a message he could not quite decipher. "Knox, can you come take a look at something here?" Knox sat down the magazine and crossed the chair. Darla tilted Arlen's head forward slightly and parted his hair at the base of his skull. There, nearly hidden by his hairline, was a small, circular mark. It was healed, but the skin was slightly puckered like a puncture wound that it closed over. "That looked like a puncture mark to you?" Darla asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner. Knox leaned closer, his heart suddenly pounding in his ears. It was small, easy to miss if you were not looking carefully, but it was definitely there, a tiny deliberate wound that had no business being on his son's head. "Arlen," Knox kept his voice steady through sheer force of will. "Did someone give you a shot at school? Or maybe at the doctor's?" Arlen frowned, confused. "A shot? No, I have not been to the doctor in a long time." Darla and Knox exchanged glances. She resumed cutting, but her movements were more mechanical now. Her cheerful banter replaced by a tense silence. "You know," Darla said finally, her voice pitched low. "My cousin's kid had seizures. Started with headaches. Turns out it was something pressing on his brain." Knox felt sick. "Arlen's been having headaches. Bad ones. And sometimes he zones out, gets confused." Darla's scissors stilled again. She met Knox's eyes in the mirror, her face grave. "You take it to a doctor now," she said, giving Knox a serious look. "Today, not tomorrow." Today, when they were done, Knox paid and added a generous tip. Darla clasped his hand, holding a moment longer than necessary. "You call me," she said firmly. "Let me know what the doc says." In the car, Knox called the local pediatric clinic, demanding an appointment that same day. He cited an emergency, used his most authoritative voice, the one that had made new recruits snap to attention, and somehow secured a 4:30 slot with drive. Peterson. The pediatric clinic smelled of antiseptic and artificial cherry flavor. Knox sat rigidly in a child-sized chair, while Arlen flipped through a tattered copy of Highlights magazine. "Dad, when can we go home? I'm hungry," Arlen said, setting the magazine aside. "Soon, buddy, Dr. Peterson just needs to check you out first." Knox had been watching his son closely since they left Darla's twice now. Arlen had paused mid-sentence, his eyes going distant for several seconds before he resumed talking as if nothing had happened. It was subtle, easy to miss if you were not looking for it. But Knox was looking now, and what he saw terrified him. A nurse called Arlen's name, and they followed her to an examination room. Knox recounted the symptoms to Dr. Peterson, the headaches, the confusion, the moments of absence. He mentioned the mark at the base of Arlen's skull, watching the doctor's face carefully for any reaction to Dr. Peterson examined Arlen thoroughly, paying special attention to the puncture mark. His expression remained professionally neutral, but Knox caught the slight furrow of his brow. "It could be several things. Dr. Peterson said, finally, migraines can present this way in children. So can certain types of petit mal seizures. The mark on his scalp is curious, but it could be from a fall he does not remember, or even an insect bite that got infected. He has not fallen," Knox said firmly, "and I want imaging, MRI, CT scan, whatever it takes." Dr. Peterson hesitated. "Mr. Halstead, those are expensive procedures and your insurance." "I do not care about the cost," Knox interrupted. "My son is sick. Something's wrong with his brain. I want to know what it is." "Dad," Arlen said quietly, looking small and vulnerable on the examination table. "Am I going to die?" The question hit Knox hard. He moved to his son's side, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "No, buddy. Absolutely not. We're just going to figure out what's causing your headaches. That's all." Dr. Peterson sighed. "I understand your concern, Mr. Halstead, but let's start with blood work and a referral to a neurologist. If those indicate a need for imaging, we'll proceed from there. Knox knew he was being stonewalled, whether it was because of insurance limitations or medical protocol did not matter. What mattered was that his son needed help now, not after weeks of referrals and preliminary tests. Fine, he said tersely. We'll do the blood work. Today, after Arlen's blood was drawn, they headed home. Knox made a decision. He would not wait for the local doctors to run through their protocols. He needed someone he could trust. Once Arlen was settled with dinner in front of the TV, Knox stepped onto the back porch and called Tom Langston. They served together before Tom had left to finish medical school. And although they did not speak often, the bond forged in combat had never weakened. Knox, Tom answered, his voice warm with surprise. It's been a while. How's life in small-town America? Not good, Tom. Knox said, cutting to the chase. It's Arlen. Something's wrong. And I do not trust the docs here to figure out. There was a moment of silence on the line. Tell me everything. Tom said, his tone shifting from friendly to professional in an instant. Knox detailed the symptoms, the headaches, the confusion, the lapses in attention. He described the puncture mark Darla had found. And Mary, what does she say about all this? Tom asked carefully. Knox hesitated. Tom had never hidden his dislike of Mary. From the beginning, he warned Knox that she seemed cold, calculating, fundamentally self-interested. Knox had brushed it off as overprotectiveness from an old friend. She thinks I'm overreacting. Knox admitted, says it's just normal kid stuff. It's not, Tom said flatly. Not for what you re-describing. Bring him to Seattle. I'll examine myself, run whatever tests we need. No insurance red tape relief flooded through Knox. When tomorrow, can you make the drive? We'll be there. When Knox returned inside, Mary was standing in the kitchen, arms crossed. Where were you? She demanded. And why is Arlen eating in front of the TV? You know, I do not like that. We were with the doctor, Knox said, watching her reaction carefully. Arlen's headaches are getting worse. Something flickered across Mary's face too fast to identify. Was it concern, fear, guilt? What did they say? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Nothing helpful. They want to do blood work. Maybe refer him to a specialist. But I call Tom. We're driving to Seattle tomorrow. He's going to run proper tests. Mary's face hardened. Seattle tomorrow. Knox. That's ridiculous. Arlen has school. You have work. I have plans. Knox finished, a bitter edge to his voice. What exactly is so important that it outweighs our son's health, Mary? That's not fair. She snapped. I just think you jumping to conclusions. Dr. Peterson is perfectly competent. Dr. Peterson is going through the motions. Knox cut in. Tom will give us answers, not referrals. Mary's jaw tightened. Fine. Do what you want. You always do. She stormed upstairs, leaving Knox alone in the kitchen. He stood there for a long moment, tried to understand when his marriage had become this battlefield of resentment and suspicion. Then he pushed the thought aside. Arlen was what mattered now. Everything else could wait. The drive to Seattle took just over 3 hours, with Arlen dozing in the back seat for most of it. Knox had left Mary in notes simple and to the point, taking Arlen to Tom's back tomorrow. He had not waited to see her reaction. Tom's clinic was on the outskirts of Seattle, a modern building of glass and steel. Tom was waiting for them in the lobby, his familiar face lined with new wrinkles, but his handshake as firm as ever. Knox, he said warmly, then knelt to Arlen's level, and you must be Arlen. Last time I saw you, you were just a baby. Look at you now, practically a man. Arlen smiled shyly. Are you gonna make my headaches go away? Tom's expression softened. That's the plan, buddy. First, we need to take some pictures of your brain. Have you ever had an MRI before? Arlen shook his head. It's like a big camera that can see inside your head. Tom explained, "It's a bit noisy, but it does not hurt at all. Think you can handle that?" Arlen nodded solemnly. "I'm not scared." Tom led them through the clinic to a room with an MRI machine. He explained each step to Arlen in simple terms, helping him onto the table and making sure he was comfortable before starting the scan. "He's a brave kid," Tom said to Knox as they watched from behind the glass partition. "Takes after his old man." Knox nodded, throat tight with emotion. He should not have to be brave about this. He should be worrying about Little League and video games, not brain scans. "We'll figure it out," Tom promised. Whatever it is, the scan took 45 minutes. Arlen lay perfectly still the entire time, earning praise from the technician. Afterward, Tom took them to his office while the images were processed. "Hungry, Arlen?" Tom asked, pulling out a drawer filled with snacks. "Help yourself while your dad and I talk boring grown-up stuff." Arlen dug eagerly into a package of cookies. And Tom motioned for Knox to step just outside the office door. "What are not you telling me?" Knox asked immediately, recognizing the concern in his friend's eyes. Tom sighed. "The mark you described. I need to take a closer look. And I want to do a blood panel specifically looking for traces of certain medications." "Medications? What kind of medications?" "The kind used in experimental protocols." Tom said carefully, "Let me run the test first and then we'll talk." Try not to worry in front of Arlen. The next few hours were agonizing. Tom examined the puncture mark himself, took blood samples, and even a small tissue sample from the area around the mark. Arlen remained stoic throughout, but by late afternoon, his headache had returned and he curled up on a couch in Tom's office. Eyes closed against the pain. Finally, Tom called Knox into a small conference room where the MRI images were displayed on a large screen. "I found something," Tom said without preamble, pointing to a small, distinct spot at the base of Arlen's brain. "See this area here? There's evidence of repeated injections." Knox stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the gray and white patterns. "Injections of what?" "That's where it gets concerning," Tom said, pulling up another screen with blood test results. "I found traces of an experimental cognitive enhancer in his system. CX572. It's not FDA approved for use in children or anyone for that matter. It's still in clinical trials." The room seemed to tilt underneath Knox. "Are you saying someone has been injecting my son with experimental drugs? Without my knowledge or consent?" Tom's face was grim. "That's exactly what I'm saying. This is not something that happens accidentally, Knox. Someone signed your son up for a study one that's operating way outside normal ethical boundaries." Knox gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "How bad is it? Will there be permanent damage?" "It's hard to say," Tom admitted. "The drug is designed to enhance neural connectivity, improve cognitive function. But in developing brains, the side effects can be severe. Headaches, confusion, even seizures. Can it be reversed?" "With time, yes. The body will clear the drug, but we need to make sure he does not receive any more injections." Knox felt a cold, terrible clarity to send over him. "Mary," he said flatly. "She's been taking him somewhere. She always volunteers to take him for checkups, dental appointments. I thought she was just being helpful." Tom did not look surprised. "I did not want to suggest it, but how long?" Knox demanded. "How long has this been happening?" Tom studied the scans again. "Based on the tissue changes, I'd say at least a year, possibly 18 months, a year and a half. While he'd been working, trusting Mary with her son's care, she'd been subjecting Arlen to experimental drugs." The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that Knox felt physically ill. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice hollow. "First, you take Arlen home and keep him safe," Tom said firmly. "No more checkups with Mary. I'll start him on a detox protocol, safe medications that will help clear his system." And then he hesitated. "And then I confirmed my wife." Knox finished, a dangerous edge to his voice. Tom nodded slowly. "Just remember Arlen needs you. Whatever you do next, he has to be your priority. He always has been. Knox said, that's the difference between Mary and me. The drive back to Brook Ridge was silent. Arlen slept most of the way, exhausted from the tests and the persistent headache. Knox's mind raced, piecing together all the signs he missed: Mary's insistence on taking Arlen to appointments alone, her dismissal of his symptoms, her increasingly frequent trips to Portland. It was past midnight when they arrived home. Knox carried Arlen to his room, tucked him in, and stood watching his son's peaceful face for a long moment. How can anyone harm this child? How could his own mother subject him to experimental drugs? The questions burned in Knox's gut as he made his way to the master bedroom. Mary was awake, sitting up in bed with a book she was not really reading. Her eyes followed him as he entered the room. How was he? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Knox kept his distance, standing just inside the doorway. Why do not you tell me, Mary? You, the one who's been tracking his progress, are not you. Mary's expression flickered, then steadied. What are you talking about? CX 572. Knox said flatly, ring any bells? Experimental cognitive enhancer. Not approved for use in humans, let alone children. Tom found it in Arlen's bloodstream. Found the injection site, too, right at the base of his skull. Mary's face drained of color, but she recovered quickly. Knox, I do not know what Tom told you, but do not. Knox cut her off. His voice low and dangerous. Do not lie to me. Not about this. For a moment, they stared at each other across the room, two strangers sharing a house, a bed, a life that suddenly made no sense. It was not what you think, Mary finally said, setting her book aside. It was a study, a legitimate clinical trial for children with anxiety and attention issues. Arlen does not have anxiety or attention issues. Knox said through gritted teeth. Mary laughed, a brittle sound. Of course, you say that. You think he's perfect, but he was struggling, Knox. His teacher said he was falling behind. He was having nightmares. The study was helping him. Knox's voice rose despite his effort to control it. He's having burning headaches, Mary. Seizure-like episodes. That's not help. That's harm. Mary's eyes narrowed. A few side effects. They said those would fade as his body adjusted to the medication. They? Who's they? What kind of doctor experiments on children without parental consent? You would not have consented, Mary snapped. You never trust doctors. Never trust anyone but yourself and your military buddies. I did what was best for Arlen. Knox felt a terrible calm settle over him. No, you did what was best for you. What did they pay you, Mary? The question hung in the air between them. Mary's silence was answer enough. How much? Knox pressed, stepping closer to the bed. How much is our son's health worth to you? Mary's chin came up defiantly. $65,000. Over 18 months. And it was not just about the money. He was being helped. They said it would make him better, less anxious, smarter, more adjusted. The amount hit Knox like a physical blow. That explained the new clothes, the weekend away with friends, the mysterious personal account Mary had opened last year. You sold our son. Knox said, his voice a whisper now. You sold him to be a lab rat. Do not be so dramatic. Mary snapped. It was a regulated study. There were consent forms. Forms you forged my signature on. Knox guessed, watching her face. That's fraud, Mary. That's a crime. It's a misunderstanding. Mary countered, but her voice lacked conviction. The benefits outweigh the risks. Arlen was going to be exceptional. He already was exceptional. Knox said, his heart breaking for his son, for the innocent boy who trusted his mother to protect him, not harm him. He was happy and healthy and perfect exactly as he was. Mary's face hardened. You always were sentimental. That's why I had to be the practical one. Do you know how much college costs these days? How competitive the world is. I was securing his future by risking his life. Knox said flatly by letting strangers inject experimental drugs into his brain. It was not like that. Mary insisted, but the fight was draining from her voice. She knew she'd been caught, knew there was no justification that would satisfy Knox. Pack a bag. Knox said quietly, tonight you not staying in this house. Mary's eyes widened. You not kick me out. This is my home too. Not anymore. Knox said, pulling his phone from his pocket. Not after what you've done. I either call the police right now and report child endangerment and medical fraud, where you leave quietly and we handle this like adults. Your choice. Mary stared at him for a long moment. Calculation clear in her eyes. Then she slid out of bed and pulled a suitcase from the closet. You'll regret this, she said, throwing clothes haphazardly into the bag. You not raise him alone. You work too much. You too rigid. He needs me. He needs to be safe. Knox corrected something. He clearly was not with you. Mary paused in her packing, turning to face him. I did love him, in my way. Knox shook his head. Your way is not love, Mary. It's ownership. It's control. It's seeing him as an investment, not a person. Mary resumed packing, but her movements were jerky, uncoordinated. Where am I supposed to go at this hour? Call your friend Mira. Knox suggested, watching her reaction carefully. I'm sure she can put you up. After all, she's your connection to this whole mess, is not she? The flash of surprise in Mary's eyes confirmed his suspicion. Mira, the friend who worked in Portland, who had introduced Mary to her wellness group. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This is not over, Mary said as she zipped her suitcase. I would not just disappear. No, Knox agreed. I'm sure you would not. But for tonight, you leaving. And if you try to take Arlen, if you come near him without my supervision, I'll go straight to the police with everything Tom found. Understand? Mary's mouth tightened, but she nodded. She knew when she was beaten, at least temporarily. Knox watched from the porch as Mary loaded her suitcase in her car and drove away, tail lights vanishing into the night. Only then did he allow himself to sink onto the porch steps, head in his hands, the full weight of the day crashing down on him. His son had been used as a test subject for experimental drugs. His wife had betrayed them both for money. And now he was alone with a sick child and an enemy who knew exactly how to hurt them. But Knox had survived war zones and lost brothers in combat. He rebuilt his life after the military, created a business from scratch. He was no stranger to hardship or to fighting battles that seemed unwinnable. I'll fix this, Arlen. He whispered into the night, whatever it takes, I'll make this right. Knox woke with a start. His laptop still opened beside him on the couch. The first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, painting stripes across the living room floor. For one disoriented moment, he expected to hear Mary moving around upstairs, starting her day with the shower that always ran too long and used up all the hot water. Then the memories of yesterday crashed back. The MRI, Tom's grim diagnosis, Mary's confession, her departure in the middle of the night. Knox rubbed his face, feeling the stubble that had grown overnight, and checked his phone. No messages from Mary, which was not surprising. She'd be licking her wounds, regrouping, planning her next move. Upstairs, Arlen was still asleep, curled around his stuffed bear the way he had since he was a toddler. Knox stood in the doorway, watching his son's chest rise and fall, fighting the surge of rage that threatened to overwhelm him. He failed to protect Arlen, had not seen the danger living right under their roof. Never again, he promised silently, never again would anyone hurt his son. The morning routine proceeded with forced normalcy. Knox made pancakes, helped Arlen dress, and drove him to school. He decided not to disrupt Arlen's life more than necessary. The boy knew something was wrong, but Knox had kept the details vague. Just a medication that was making him sick, doctors who were going to help him get better. Where's Mom? Arlen asked as they pulled up to the school. Knox had prepared for this question. She needed to stay with her friend Mira for a while. Adult stuff, nothing for you to worry about. Arlen frowned. Is she coming back? The simple question cut through Knox like a blade. How did you tell an 8-year-old that his mother had betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible? I do not know, buddy. Knox said finally, but I'm not going anywhere. You and me were a team, right? Arlen nodded solemnly, right. After dropping Arlen off, Knox drove straight to his lawyer, Frank Mercer, who had handled Knox's business and corporation and a few contract disputes over the years. Frank listened gravely as Knox laid out the situation, only interrupting occasionally for clarification. This is serious, Knox, Frank said when he finished. What Mary did, allowing Arlen to be subjected to experimental medical procedures without your consent, accepting payment for it, that could be considered child endangerment, possibly even criminal neglect. I want custody, Knox said firmly, full custody, and I want those responsible for the trial held accountable. Frank nodded, making notes. We'll file for emergency temporary custody today, but the pharmaceutical angle that's going to be trickier. These companies have deep pockets and good lawyers. We'll need solid evidence. I have the medical records from Tom, the blood tests showing the drug, the injection site, Mary's confession. That's a start, Frank agreed, but we'll need more names of the doctors involved, documentation about the trial itself, evidence linking Mary directly to the researchers. Knox stood, his decision made. I'll get it. After leaving the lawyer's office, Knox drove home and began his own investigation. He started with Mary's laptop, which she left behind in her hasty departure. The password was easy: Arlen's birthday. For someone so secretive, Mary had always been careless with her digital security. The emails told the story in pieces, regular correspondence with someone named Mira Gentry, whose signature identified her as a clinical liaison for something called the Cognitive Enhancement Initiative. There were references to participant progress, dosage adjustments, and compensation schedules. One email in particular made Knox's blood boil. Mary: Arlen's latest cognitive assessment shows marked improvement in pattern recognition and working memory. The team is very pleased with his progress. Dr. Myrick has approved an increase in your monthly stipend to $3,800 to reflect the success of the protocol. Please continue to monitor and report any side effects as previously instructed. Best regards, Mira. They've been tracking Arlen's progress like he was a lab rat, adjusting his dosage based on test results. And Mary had been their willing accomplice, pocketing more money as the experiments intensified. Knox printed every email, every document he could find. He searched Mary's browser history, finding visits to websites for Virexa Pharmaceuticals and Cognitive Enhancement Initiative. He took screenshots, downloaded PDFs, gathered every scrap of digital evidence available. That evening, after Arlen was in bed, Knox received a text from an unknown number. You had no right to throw me out. This is not over. I have rights, Mary. Knox considered ignoring it, but then typed a response. You lost your rights when you used our son as a test subject. Do not contact me again, except through my lawyer. The reply came almost instantly. You think you know everything, but you do not. Arlen was helping other children. The research is going to change lives. You're too small-minded to see the bigger picture. Knox stared at the message incredulous. Even now, Mary was justifying what she'd done. There was no remorse, no recognition of the wrong she committed against their son. The only picture I see is my son suffering while his mother collected blood money. Stay away from us, Mary. I mean, he blocked her number and set his phone aside, hands shaking with suppressed rage. He could not afford to lose control now. Arlen needed him steady, focused, ready to fight the battles ahead. The next morning, Knox called Tom. I need more information, he said, without preamble. About Virexa, about this CX-572 drug. Anything you can find. I've been digging since you left, Tom replied. It's a startup less than 5 years old. They redeveloping cognitive enhancement drugs, supposedly for treating neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's. But there are rumors they refocused on the enhancement angle for the military market. And this trial Arlen was in. Is it legitimate? Tom's pause told Knox everything he needed to know. No official trial is registered with the FDA for pediatric use of CX-572. There's a phase 1 adult trial, but nothing involving children. If Arlen was receiving this drug as part of a trial, it was unauthorized. Off the books, Knox summarized. Completely. And dangerous as hell. We still do not know the long-term effects of these drugs on developing brains. Knox swallowed hard. Will Arlen recover? I think so. Tom said, his voice softening. The detox protocol is helping. And kids are resilient. But we need to monitor him closely. I'm gathering evidence. Knox told him. Building a case. I need everything you can give me: medical documentation, research papers on this drug. Anything that shows what they did was wrong. I'll send what I have. Tom promised. But be careful, Knox. Companies like Virexa. They play hardball when their profits are threatened. So do Marines. Knox replied grimly. 2 weeks after Mary's departure, Knox received a call from Frank. We've been granted temporary emergency custody, his lawyer reported. Mary was served with papers yesterday. She has 14 days to respond. And if she does, Knox asked, pacing his backyard while Arlen worked on homework inside. Then we go to court. But given the evidence we've presented, I think her options are limited. She'd be smarter to negotiate terms. Knox was not so sure. Mary had never been one to surrender easily. And now she had Mira and possibly Virexa backing her. This was just the opening salvo in what would likely be a prolonged battle. What about the pharmaceutical angle? Knox asked. Any progress there? Frank hesitated. I've been making inquiries discreetly. But we're talking about serious allegations against a company valued at over $1 billion. They have connections, Knox, political influence. We need to be certain of our ground. I am certain. Knox said firmly, they experimented on my son, and we'll hold them accountable. Frank assured him. But strategically, one step at a time. After ending the call, Knox gazed across his yard at the woods beyond, thinking Frank was right about being strategic. But he was thinking like a lawyer about court filings and legal precedents. Knox needed to think like a Marine about reconnaissance, gathering intelligence, understanding the enemy's position before launching an attack. The next day, Knox drove to Portland under the pretext of a job estimate. In reality, he was conducting surveillance on Mira Gentry. Thanks to social media and public records, he knew where she lived, where she worked, and her usual routines. Her office was in a sleek building in downtown Portland, with Cognitive Enhancement Initiative listed on the directory beside a dozen other medical research organizations. Knox sat in his truck across the street, watching as Mira emerged for lunch, accompanied by a distinguished-looking older man with silver hair and an expensive suit. Using the camera, Tom had lent him with a zoom lens powerful enough to identify people at a distance. Knox snapped several photos of them together. Later, using facial recognition software, Tom had access to through his hospital. They identified the men as Dr. Silas Myrick, the neurologist whose name appeared on documents from all 4 families Knox had contacted. That's our connection. Knox said grimly, staring at the man's face on the computer screen. Myrick runs the trials, Mira recruits the parents, and Virexa supplies the drugs and the money. But why risk unauthorized trials on children? Tom wondered. The legal liability is enormous. Knox had been pondering the same question. Time, he said, finally, adult trials would take years to complete. By using children who show results faster due to their developing brains, they can get preliminary efficacy data much sooner. And jump ahead of competitors, Tom added, understanding dawning. In the pharmaceutical industry, being first to market with a cognitive enhancer would be worth billions. Exactly. They re-gambling with children's health for a market advantage. Over the next week, Knox built detailed profiles of both Myrick and Mira. Myrick had an impressive resume: Harvard Medical School, prestigious residencies, published research on cognitive enhancement therapies. But 5 years ago, he left his position at Johns Hopkins under circumstances that were not clear from public records. Shortly after, he joined Virexa as their chief medical officer. Mira was harder to pin down. Her LinkedIn profile showed a nursing degree and a series of positions with pharmaceutical companies, always in patient outreach or clinical liaison roles. But there were gaps in her employment history, periods where she seemed to disappear from the professional record. What neither of them knew was that Knox was monitoring them electronically. Tom had put him in touch with a former military intelligence officer who now worked in cybersecurity. For no questions asked, he set up monitoring on the email addresses Knox had found in Mary's correspondence. The first breakthrough came 3 days later. An email from Myrick to Mira, forwarded to Knox by his contact. Mira, the IRB, is asking questions about our recruitment methods. Make sure all future consent forms are properly documented and signed by both parents. Retroactive compliance is not ideal, but it's our only option at this point. Get Mary Halstead to come in and sign the updated forms ASAP. Her husband is becoming a problem we need to contain. That Silas IRB Institutional Review Board. The ethics committee that was supposed to oversee human research, they were getting suspicious. And Myrick was covering his tracks. 2 days later. Another email, Dr. Myrick, Mary Halstead refuses to come in, says her husband has filed for emergency custody and she is afraid of making things worse. Should we proceed with the Phase 2 subjects without resolving this issue? Mira and Myrick's response, no choice now. Accelerate Phase 2. We need results before the Chicago presentation next month. As for Halstead, have legal draw up a settlement offer. $100K plus medical expenses in exchange for a comprehensive NDA. If he refuses, we'll explore other options. That SNOX forwarded both emails to Frank with a terse note. They trying to buy me off. Frank called immediately. This is good, Knox. It means they worried, but also means they watching you. Be careful. I'm always careful. Knox replied, but I'm not stopping either. That evening, while reviewing the documents he gathered, Knox spotted something he missed before. A pattern in the payment dates to Mary. They coincided exactly with Arlen's checkups. Appointments Mary had insisted on taking him to alone. But they also aligned with something else. The days Arlen's headaches were typically worst. Injection days. Knox felt sick as the realization hit him. Every time Arlen had been given another dose of the experimental drug. Every time his young body had struggled to process the foreign chemicals being pumped into his brain, Mary had been depositing blood money into her secret account. His phone buzzed with a text from a new unknown number. You should take the settlement offer. It's the best outcome for everyone, especially Arlen. Mary, so she was still in contact with Mira and Myrick, still part of their network, still choosing them over her own son. Knox did not bother responding. Instead, he drafted an email to Frank outlining what he learned about the timing of the injections and the payments, adding it to the growing file of evidence against Mary, Myrick, and Varexa. The next day, Knox received an unexpected visitor at his job site, Sheriff Winstead, looking uncomfortable in his tan uniform. Got a minute, Knox? He asked, glancing around at the half-constructed deck Knox was building. Knox set down his drill. What's up, Sheriff? Complaint came in yesterday. From Mary, the sheriff shifted his weight awkwardly. She's alleging you've been harassing her with threatening messages. Says you would not let her see Arlen. Knox felt a surge of anger, but kept his face neutral. Did she show you these alleged messages? No, Winstead admitted. Said they were on a phone. She left at your house. Convenient. Knox observed dryly. The truth is, I have not contacted Mary at all except through my lawyer. She's the one who keeps reaching out from different numbers. The sheriff nodded, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. Figured as much. But I had to follow up, you understand. I do. Knox hesitated, then decided to take a risk. Sheriff, you've known me a long time. Known our family. Have you ever seen me be anything but a good father to Arlen? Never. Winstead said promptly. That's why this whole situation does not sit right with me. Mary leaving suddenly, these complaints. What's really going on, Knox? Knox considered his options. Sheriff Winstead was well respected in Brookridge, known for his integrity. If he was going to fight Myrick and Varexa, he'd need allies and positions of authority. If I tell you, it stays between us for now. I'm building a legal case, and I see not risk it being compromised. Winstead nodded solemnly. You have my word. Knox led the sheriff to his truck and pulled out the folder of evidence he kept with him now. He explained everything: the headaches, the discovery of the injection site, Tom's diagnosis, Mary's confession, the network of doctors running unauthorized drug trials on children. That Winstead's expression grew increasingly grave as Knox talked. When Knox finished, the sheriff was silent for a long moment, staring at the medical documentation in his hands. This is, he finally said, shaking his head. I do not even have words. Knox. It's criminal. It's evil. That's why I need custody, Knox explained, to keep Arlen safe. Mary's still working with them, still defending what they did. Winstead handed the folder back, his jaw set. The custody hearing. When is it? Next week. Tuesday. I'll be there. Winstead promised. Not in uniform, just as a character witness. Someone who's known you both for years. Knox felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thank you, Sheriff. Winstead clapped him on the shoulder. Ed, call me Ed. And Knox, watch your back. People who do this to children will not hesitate to come after you if they feel threatened. I know. Knox said grimly. Believe me, I know. The weekend brought a new complication. Arlen's headaches, which have been improving under Tom's detox protocol, suddenly worsened again. Knox found him curled on his bed Friday after school, hands pressed to his temples, tears streaming down his face. It's bad, Dad, he whimpered. Really bad. Knox held him gently, heart racing with fear and anger. When did it start? At lunch, Arlen managed between shallow breaths. The nurse gave me medicine, but it did not help. The nurse. Alarm bells rang in Knox's mind. What medicine, Arlen? Do you remember what it looked like? Arlen frowned. I still closed against the pain. A little cup. White liquid. Tasted gross. Knox reached for his phone, hands shaking with rage. Not at school. They would not dare. But doubt not at him. What if Myrick's network reached even into Brookridge Elementary? He called the school immediately, demanding to speak to the principal. Yes, Arlen had visited the nurse. No, the nurse had not given him any medication that would require parental consent forms that were not on file. He simply rested in the nurse's office until he felt well enough to return a class. Someone was lying. Either Arlen confused by pain, or the school covering their tracks. Knox made a decision. He called Tom. I need to bring Arlen up there now, he said, already packing an overnight bag. Something's happened. The headaches are back, worse than before. I'll clear my schedule, Tom promised. And Knox bring anything he might have ingested today. Water bottle, lunchbox, everything. The drive to Seattle was tense, with Arlen moaning softly in the back seat, despite the children's pain reliever Knox had given him. At Tom's clinic, they rushed Arlen straight to an examination room. Same symptoms. Tom asked as he gently examined Arlen's eyes, reflexes, and the injection site at the base of his skull. Worse, Knox said tersely. And he says the school nurse gave him medicine. Tom's expression darkened. I'm running another blood panel. Right now, the results confirmed their worst fears. Sex 572 was back in Arlen's system. Someone had dosed him again recently, within the past 6 hours. How Knox demanded pacing Tom's office while Arlen rested in the adjacent exam room, finally comfortable after Tom had administered a counteractive agent. How could they get to him at school? It could have been anything, Tom said grimly. Food, drink, even a seemingly innocent candy from a friend. These drugs can be delivered in multiple forms. Knox slammed his fist against the wall. ICA not protect him. Even at school, ICA not keep him safe. Yes, you can, Tom said firmly. But you need to escalate this, Knox. Not just the custody battle. This is criminal activity, now drugging a child at school against explicit medical advice without parental consent. Knox nodded, his mind racing ahead to the next steps. I need to go public below this wide open. Carefully, Tom cautioned. These people have resources, connections. They fight back hard, let them. Knox said, his voice cold with determination. They came after my son. Again, this ends now. That night, from the safety of Tom's guest room, where Arlen slept peacefully under sedation, Knox made 3 crucial calls. First, to Frank, updating him on the latest development and instructing him to file criminal charges against unknown persons for administering drugs to Arlen without consent. Second, to Sheriff Winstead, who promised to personally investigate the school nurse and review security footage from the cafeteria. And third, to a medical ethics watchdog organization, Tom had recommended the Center for Responsible Medical Research. Knox provided them with a carefully curated selection of evidence. Tom's medical findings, the emails between Myrick and Mira, testimony from 2 of the other families who had agreed to come forward anonymously. This is exactly the kind of case we handle, said the center's director, a former FDA investigator named Eleanor Katz. Unauthorized trials, vulnerable subjects, corporate malfeasance. We can trigger an ethics investigation that will get the attention of the actual FDA. How quickly can you move? Knox asked. We file the initial report Monday morning, Katz promised. Once that happens, Varexa will be legally obligated to preserve all records related to CX-572 and any trials involving it. If they destroy evidence after receiving notice, that's a federal offense. They try to bury it. Knox warned. These people are careful. They always are, Katz agreed. But we know their playbook. And unlike them, we're not breaking any laws. The system may be slow, but when it finally moves, it's unstoppable. Knox was not so sure. Systems had failed his family before, but he had to use every weapon available. And an ethics investigation would at least force Myrick and Varexa to play defense for a while. By Sunday evening, the pieces were in motion. Sheriff Winstead had identified a substitute teaching assistant who had been in the cafeteria Friday, a woman no one recognized who had left immediately after lunch. Frank had filed the criminal complaint. And Katz had prepared the ethics violation report, ready to submit first thing Monday morning. Knox watched his son sleeping peacefully and made a silent vow. He would dismantle Myrick's entire network piece by piece, person by person, until no child was ever again subjected to their experiments. Monday morning brought a storm of activity. Knox kept Arlen home from school, unwilling to risk another incident until he could be certain the threat was contained. Frank called to report that the criminal complaint had been filed. And Katz confirmed that the ethics violation report had been submitted to the FDA, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the State Medical Board. The first sign that their actions had struck a nerve came just after noon. Knox's phone rang with a number he did not recognize. Mr. Halstead, the voice was smooth professional. This is Jeffrey Simmons, legal counsel for Varexa Pharmaceuticals. I understand you've been making some concerning allegations about our company and our research protocols. Knox's grip tightened on the phone, not allegations, facts, which I've documented extensively. I see Simmons' tone remain neutral. Well, facts or allegations, these matters are best resolved through direct discussion rather than regulatory filings that can damage reputations needlessly. I'd like to arrange a meeting. No, Knox cut him off. I'm not meeting with anyone from Varexa. I'm not negotiating. And I'm not signing any NDAs. Your company experimented on my son without my consent. That's not something we can resolve with a discussion. There was a pause. When Simmons spoke again, his voice had hardened. Mr. Halstead, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Litigation in these matters can be extraordinarily complex and expensive. Varexa is prepared to offer fair compensation for any misunderstandings that may have occurred. Misunderstandings. Knox almost laughed. Your chief medical officer ran unauthorized drug trials on children. Your clinical liaison recruited vulnerable families and paid them to keep quiet. And when I discovered what you'd done, you tried to dose my son again at a school. Those are not misunderstandings, Mr. Simmons. They're crimes. Those are very serious accusations, Simmons said carefully, without substantial evidence. I have the evidence. Knox interrupted. Blood tests, medical imaging, emails between your employees discussing the trials, testimony from other families, bank records showing payments to my wife. And I've shared all of it with people who will make it public. If anything happens to me or my son, another silence longer this time, I'll convey your position to my clients, Simmons finally said. But I urge you to consider the potential consequences of the path you re-choosing, not just for Varexa, but for yourself and your family. The implied threat hung in the air. Knox felt a cold anger settle in his chest. I'm a former Marine, Mr. Simmons. I've faced worse threats than corporate lawyers. Tell your clients to prepare for war. After ending the call, Knox contacted Frank, repeating the conversation verbatim. They running scared. Frank observed that veiled threat at the end they would not risk that if they were not worried, or they confident they can intimidate us in a backing down. Knox countered. Either way, we document everything, every call, every interaction, and we stay the course. The next threat came from a different direction. Sheriff Winstead arrived at Knox's door, his expression grave. Mary filed a report, he said without preamble, alleging parental kidnapping, says you took Arlen across state lines without her permission in violation of her parental rights. Knox felt a surge of frustration. I have emergency temporary custody. You do, Winstead agreed. But she's arguing that you obtained it fraudulently by making false accusations against her. False accusations. I have her confession on record. She admitted to signing him up for the trial to receiving money for it. Winstead held up a hand. I know, and I believe you. But legally, I'm obligated to follow up on her complaint. Knox understood the sheriff's position. What do you need from me? Documentation. Proof that Arlen needed urgent medical care, justifying the trip to Seattle. Proof of the custody order. Anything that shows you were acting in his best interest. Knox invited the sheriff inside and produced the emergency custody order, Tom's medical reports, and the blood test results showing CX 572 in Arlen's system, both before and after the school incident. Winstead reviewed the documents carefully, then nodded. This should be sufficient. For now, at least. For now, the sheriff sighed. Knox, I'm going to be straight with you. This is getting complicated. Mary's hired a high-priced attorney from Portland. She's making a lot of noise about character assassination, claiming you mentally unstable from PTSD, that you paranoid about medical authorities because of what happened to your brother. Knox felt a flare of anger. She's using Matt's death against me. She's using everything she can. Winstead said bluntly. And she's got backing. That attorney is not the kind of teacher's aide can afford on her own. Varexa, Knox said grimly. They refunding her legal defense to discredit me. Winstead neither confirmed nor denied it. But his expression spoke volumes. Just be careful, Knox. Cross every T, every I. These people play dirty and are trying to paint you as the bad guy here. Throughout the week, Knox fortified his position. He hired a private security company to install cameras around his property. He arranged for Mrs. Fenton, a retired teacher from down the street, to stay with Arlen at all times when he could not be there himself. He worked with Tom to document every aspect of Arlen's medical condition and treatment. And he waited for the next move from Myrick and Varexa, knowing it would come. It arrived Thursday evening as Knox was helping Arlen with his homework. A knock at the door revealed another sheriff's deputy, not Winstead, holding a thick envelope. Court summons Mr. Halstead, the deputy said formally, you required to appear next Tuesday regarding custody of your son. Knox accepted the envelope, noting the Portland law firm's return address. Thank you, deputy. Inside was a detailed petition from Mary seeking to overturn the emergency custody order. The allegations were exactly as Winstead had warned. Knox was mentally unstable, suffering from PTSD and paranoia. He had a pathological distrust of medical authorities stemming from childhood trauma. He was fabricating accusations against Mary out of misplaced revenge for their failing marriage. Most damning of all, Mary claimed that Arlen had been enrolled in a legitimate clinical study for anxiety and attention issues with proper oversight and documentation. She produced consent forms bearing what appeared to be Knox's signature, clearly forged, but convincing enough to raise questions. Knox spread the documents across his kitchen table after Arlen was in bed, photographing each page to send to Frank. This was Mary's counterattack, backed by Varexa's resources and desperation. But they made a critical mistake. In their rush to discredit Knox, they confirmed the existence of the trial, something Varexa's lawyer had been careful not to do. Now they were on record admitting that Arlen had been enrolled in a study involving sex, 572, directly contradicting the company's public position that no pediatric trials were underway. Knox highlighted this contradiction in his email to Frank, adding they panicking, making mistakes. We need to press harder. Frank's response came within the hour. Agreed. I'm filing our response first thing tomorrow. And Knox, the ethics board has convinced 2 more families to come forward. We rebuilding a coalition they not easily dismiss. By Friday morning, Knox had formulated a new strategy, playing defense responding to Mary's legal maneuvers. Documenting past violations was not enough. He needed to force Myrick and his network into the open, where their actions would be exposed to public scrutiny. He began by expanding his surveillance, using skills honed during his military service and equipment borrowed from former Marine buddies. Knox set up monitoring systems around his property. Motion-activated cameras covered every approach to the house. Sensors on the doors and windows would alert him to any attempted entry. But the physical security was just the beginning. Knox's friend from cyber intelligence had helped him access Mary's email remotely, a legally questionable move, but one Knox justified as necessary to protect Arlen. The emails revealed that Mary and Mira were in frequent contact, discussing strategy for the upcoming custody hearing. Most alarming was an exchange from Wednesday night. Mira, Dr. M says we need to move forward with the final phase as planned. He's worried Arlen's data will be excluded if the custody situation is not resolved soon. Can you arrange for me to have access next week? Even just for an hour? Mira's response has been cautious but affirmative. Mary too risky in brokerage right now. The sheriff is watching and Knox has installed security. But we can bring Arlen to the Portland facility if you can get him there. Tuesday afternoon would work. Dr. M will be present to oversee. Just focus on the hearing in the morning. If the judge grants even temporary visitation, we can make this work. That mirror the final phase. Knox's blood ran cold as he read those words. Whatever they've been doing to Arlen, they were not finished. They were planning to take him after the hearing to continue their experiments despite everything that had happened. Knox forwarded the emails to Frank with a terse note. They planning to abduct Arlen after the hearing. We need to be ready. Frank's response was equally brief. Forwarding to law enforcement. Do not do anything rash. But Knox was not planning anything rash. He was planning something meticulous, carefully calculated to expose Myrick's entire operation. He started by establishing a trap. Using Mary's email account, he sent a message to Mira. Change of plans. Knox is taking Arlen to his mother's in Eugene this weekend. House will be empty night through Sunday. Left my files in the home office, need to retrieve them before Tuesday's hearing. Can you help? Knox changed the locks, but I know how to get in through the back door. That Mira took the bait. I'll come by Saturday night. 10 p.m. We need those files, especially the original consent forms. Are they in the office or somewhere else? Mari's reply. Composed by Knox. Office desk, bottom drawer. There's a false bottom. Knox does not know about it. All the originals are there, including the ones with his signature that I kept separate from the copies. Mary. It was a perfect setup. Knox had no intention of leaving the house empty. In fact, he arranged for Sheriff Winstead to be present, along with a trusted deputy. When Mira arrived to retrieve the non-existent files, she be caught breaking and entering, providing the first solid evidence of criminal activity by Varexa's representatives. Saturday evening arrived, and with it, Sheriff Winstead and Deputy Carter. They positioned themselves discreetly in Knox's home, ready to catch Mira in the act of breaking in. You sure she'll come? Winstead asked as they waited in the darkened living room. She'll come. Knox said confidently. She needs those consent forms too badly to pass up the opportunity. At 9:52 p.m., Knox's security system alerted him to movement at the back of the property. A figure in dark clothing approached cautiously, testing the back door before producing what appeared to be a lockpick set. Knox nodded to Winstead, who spoke quietly into his radio, alerting Deputy Carter's station outside. They waited as Mira worked on the lock, eventually gaining entry to the kitchen. The trap was sprung perfectly. As Mira made her way toward the office, flashlight beam bobbing in the darkness. Winstead stepped out, badge displayed, gun holstered but visible. "Freeze, Sheriff's Department." Mira froze, then made a desperate dash for the back door, only to find Deputy Carter blocking her escape. She was handcuffed and read her rights within minutes. Her initial protests giving way to a tense silence as she realized the severity of her situation. In her possession were burglary tools, a digital camera, and most incriminating of all, a syringe containing what later testing would confirm was Sax. 572. She had come not just for documents, but potentially to plant the drug somewhere in Knox's home. Perhaps to contaminate Arland's food or drinks, as. Winstead and Carter led Mira away. Knox felt a grim satisfaction. The first domino had fallen. Mira's arrest would trigger investigations, warrant scrutiny that Myrick and Varexa could not easily deflect. But Knox knew this was just the beginning. The real battle for Arland's safety, for justice against those who had harmed him, for the truth to be known, was still ahead. Knox jolted awake at 5 a.m. His hand automatically reaching for the phone before it completed its first ring. It was Tom. They moved up their timetable. Tom said without preamble. Mary filed an emergency motion. The hearing's been rescheduled for this morning at 9. Knox was instantly alert. Sleep falling away like a discarded blanket. Based on what grounds? She's claiming Mira's arrest was a setup that you manipulated her into breaking into your home as part of a campaign to discredit Varexa and win the custody battle. That's insane. Knox protested. She broke in with a syringe of Sax. 572. What innocent explanation could there be for that? None, Tom agreed. But they, re-spinning it, saying Mira was coming to check on the house at Mary's request. That the syringe was planted evidence. It's desperate, but they got a judge willing to hear them out. Knox glanced at his watch. 4 hours until the hearing. Not enough time to properly prepare, which was precisely the point. They hoping to catch us off guard. Exactly. And Knox, there's something else. My contact at Varexa says Myrick is preparing to leave the country tonight. Singapore. Knox tradition. The pieces clicked in a place in Knox's mind. They accelerating everything. The hearing, Myrick's escape. They know we have them cornered. So they making one last play for Arlen. What's the plan? Tom asked. Knox had already been formulating contingency scenarios for exactly the situation. Plan B, the extraction. Can you be ready? Already am. Tom confirmed. When? Now. Today. As soon as we hang up. No time to waste. I'll head out immediately. 3 hours to Brookridge. Meet you at the rendezvous point at 8. Knox into the call and move with practiced efficiency. He packed a small bag for Arlen with essentials, clothes, medications, his favorite book, and stuffed bear. He gathered the most critical evidence, securing it in a waterproof pouch. He checked his security system, ensuring all cameras were operational, all doors and windows secure. Then he woke Arlen gently, sitting on the edge of his bed. Hey, buddy. Time to get up. We going on a trip today. Arlen rubbed his eyes sleepily. What kind of trip? Knox kept his voice casual, reassuring. A camping trip with Uncle Tom. Remember him from Seattle? He's going to take us to a special place where your headaches can get better. Arlen sat up, suddenly more alert. His mom coming? Knox shook his head. Not this time. It's just the skies. To his relief, Arlen did not press the issue. He nodded and climbed out of bed, moving to his closet to get dressed. Knox had never been more grateful for his son's resilience, his quiet acceptance of the increasingly strange circumstances of his life. While Arlen dressed and packed a few toys, Knox made 2 crucial calls. First to Frank, explaining the situation and instructing him to stall the hearing by any legal means necessary. Second, to Sheriff Winstead, informing him of the extraction plan without providing specific details. "I see not tell you where we going," Knox said firmly. "For Arlen's safety, but I'm not kidnapping him. I have legal custody. I'm protecting him from people who, already proven they, break the law to get to him." Winstead was silent for a moment. "I understand. But Knox, once you leave my jurisdiction, I see not help you if they get a federal warrant." "They will not," Knox assured him. "Not with the evidence we have. Just give us time to get Arlen somewhere safe." 24 hours, Winstead promised. "After that, I'll have to report exactly what I know. Which is not much. That's all we need." Knox said gratefully to by 7:30 a.m. Knox and Arlen were in the truck, heading away from Brookridge, but not towards Seattle, as anyone monitoring them might expect. Instead, they took back roads east toward the rendezvous point Knox and Tom had established days earlier as part of their contingency planning. The abandoned fire lookout station was accessible only by a rough dirt road that Knox's South four-wheel drive truck handled easily. It offered clear sight lines in all directions, making it impossible for anyone to approach undetected. Tom was already waiting when they arrived, his own vehicle hidden beneath camouflage netting. "Uncle Tom," Arlen cried, genuinely happy to see the doctor despite the strange circumstances. Tom hugged the boy warmly. "Hey kiddo, ready for our big adventure?" While Arlen explored the lookout tower, Knox and Tom conferred quietly. "Frank called," Tom reported. "He managed to get the hearing postponed until tomorrow on procedural grounds. But it's only a temporary delay." "It's enough," Knox said grimly. "By tomorrow, we'll be at the Montana facility." The Montana facility was Tom's suggestion, a private neurological clinic run by a former military doctor who specialized in treating traumatic brain injuries. It operated outside the standard medical establishment with stringent privacy protocols for its patients, many of whom were veterans with security concerns. Dr. Hayes is expecting us, Tom confirmed. She's prepared a complete detox protocol for Arlen. No records in the system, everything off the books. "And Myrick," Knox asked, "my contact confirms he's booked on a 10 p.m. flight to Singapore." He's running, Knox, which means he knows he's finished here. Knox nodded, staring out at the forested landscape below the lookout tower. "Good, let him run. All I care about now is getting Arlen safe and healthy." They switched to Tom's car, which was less recognizable than Knox's truck, and began a long drive to Montana. Arlen told they were going on a special camping trip, settled happily in the back seat with his books and toys. Occasionally, he complained of a mild headache, but nothing like the debilitating pain he'd experienced before they crossed the state line into Idaho. Knox felt his phone vibrate. A text from Frank. Mary showed up for hearing with Varick's lawyers. Judge was not pleased with postponement. New hearing set for Friday. I filed our evidence on Myra's break-in. Sheriff testified about syringe. Things looking good for our side. Knox allowed himself a small measure of relief. The legal front was holding. Now they just needed to get Arlen to safety to begin the real work of healing his body and brain from the damage Myrick's experiments had caused. The Montana facility was nestled in a remote valley surrounded by mountains. Its perimeter secured by both natural barriers and discreet, but effective security measures. Dr. Hayes met them personally at the gate. A tall woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that immediately focused on Arlen. "This is our young patient," she said, kneeling to Arlen's level. "I'm Dr. Hayes. I'm going to help make those headaches go away for good. Would you like that?" Arlen nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. Good man." She straightened, addressing Knox and Tom. We're ready for him. The initial assessment will take about 2 hours, then we'll develop a customized detox protocol. I reviewed the blood work Dr. Langston sent over, concerning, but not irreversible. Knox felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since discovering the puncture mark on Arlen's neck, he allowed himself to believe that his son would truly recover, would be whole and healthy again. While Arlen underwent treatment at the Montana facility, Knox and Tom continued building their case against Myrick and Varexa. Tom's contact confirmed that Myrick had indeed fled to Singapore, abandoning his position at Varexa with no notice. The company was in damage control mode, issuing vague statements about personnel changes and reviewing research protocols. On the fifth day, Frank called with an update on the legal front. Mary's case is falling apart. He reported with satisfaction. The judge reviewed our evidence, particularly the syringe Mirror was carrying and the emails discussing plans to take Arlen for more treatments, and was not impressed. He's inclined to grant you permanent sole custody. In Mary, Knox asked, his voice hard, facing charges of her own now: child endangerment, fraud, falsifying medical consent forms. Her Varexa-funded lawyers are scrambling, but the evidence is overwhelming. Knox absorbed this news with grim satisfaction. In Varexa itself, that's where it gets interesting, Frank said. The FDA has launched a formal investigation based on the ethics complaint. They seized records from the Portland facility. The company's stock has dropped 30% in 3 days. They desperately trying to distance themselves from Myrick, claiming he went rogue, but the evidence shows corporate knowledge. Knox pointed out the payments, the infrastructure, the Portland facility itself. Exactly, which is why the shareholders are in full panic mode. There's talk of a class action lawsuit from families of all the children involved in these unauthorized trials. It's a legal and financial disaster for them. Knox felt no sympathy. Companies like Varexa, people like Myrick, they operated with impunity because they believed their money and connections made them untouchable. They were learning otherwise at long last. Keep pushing. Knox instructed Frank. No settlements, no deals. I want full disclosure of everything they did, everyone who was involved. Knox contacted a journalist with documents from Myra's emails, signed consent forms with forged digital signatures, and proof of Mary receiving money. He also sent copies to Oregon's Child Protection Services and a state senator. A podcast broke the story. Children used in secret drug trials, Oregon families betrayed. Myra was suspended. Varexa tanks. Mary's name was dragged publicly. Knox leaks everything without showing his face. As the second week at the Montana facility began, Arlen showed clear signs of improvement. The headaches were less frequent, less severe. The cognitive symptoms, the moments of confusion, the lapses in attention had diminished significantly. He was sleeping better, eating normally, beginning to show interest in activities beyond just getting through each day. One evening, as they sat on the facility's porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Arlen looked up at Knox with clear eyes, clearer than they'd been in months. "Dad," he said quietly, "I remember things now. From before, when Mom would take me to those doctors." Knox tensed but kept his voice gentle. "What do you remember, buddy?" "They made me do tests, memory games, puzzles, and then they would give me the medicine, the shots at the back of my neck." Arlen reached up unconsciously, touching the spot where the puncture mark had been. "Mom said it would make me smarter, better at school, but just made everything fuzzy, like I was underwater." Knox put his arm around his son's shoulders. "You do not have to worry about that anymore. Those people not hurt you now." "Is that why Mom left?" Arlen asked, his voice small. "Because of the medicine." Knox chose his words carefully. "Mom made some bad choices. She thought she was helping you, but she was wrong. And now she needs to face the consequences of those choices. Is she ever coming back?" Knox would not lie to his son, but he could not burden him with a full truth either. "I do not know," he said finally. "Right now, the most important thing is getting you better. Everything else can wait." The morning after their return to Brook Ridge, Knox awoke to the sound of his phone vibrating insistently on the nightstand. The screen showed multiple missed calls, text messages, and news alerts, all related to Chen's podcast that had just dropped. Lab Rats, the Children of Varexa. The podcast expanded on her initial article, featuring interviews with 2 other families who had participated in the CX-572 trials, as well as medical experts who explained the dangers of experimenting with cognitive enhancers on developing brains. Knox's story, carefully anonymized, but powerfully told, formed the narrative backbone, presenting him as the father who had uncovered the truth and fought to protect not just his son, but all the children involved. Knox listened with growing satisfaction as Chen methodically dismantled Erexa's denials using internal documents, witness testimony, and medical evidence to expose the company's knowing participation in Myrick's unethical experiments. But it was the final segment that truly sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry and beyond. Chen had obtained audio recordings apparently from a whistleblower inside Erexa of executive meetings where the pediatric trials were explicitly discussed and approved. The company's CEO could be heard saying, "The regulatory pathway for adult use will take years. Children show results faster and parents are surprisingly amenable when you frame it as cognitive enhancement rather than experimental drug trial, particularly if the financial incentives are persuasive." Another voice identified in the podcast as Myrick's added, "We already seeing promising results in subjects 12 through 19. Some side effects, yes, but nothing that could be definitively linked to CX572. As long as we maintain plausible deniability and keep the parents financially motivated, we can complete phase 2 by year-end." The recordings confirmed everything Knox had suspected, but could not prove conclusively. Vorex's highest levels had not only known about the unauthorized trials, but had actively encouraged them. Viewing the children involved as expendable test subjects in their rush to market a profitable new drug. The public reaction was explosive. National news networks picked up the story. Social media erupted with calls for criminal investigations into Vorex's practices. Medical ethicists appeared on morning shows explaining the fundamental violations of research protocols and patient rights to by noon. The first news vans appeared at the end of the street. Knox had anticipated this, had already spoken with Sheriff Winstead, who stationed a deputy near the house to keep reporters at a respectful distance. Still, Knox kept Arlen inside, away from windows, protecting him from becoming the public face of a scandal that had already stolen too much of his childhood. His phone rang constantly, journalists seeking comments, other parents from the trials looking for guidance, even a producer from a national morning show offering an exclusive interview. Knox declined them all, referring media inquiries to Frank, focusing solely on Arlen's continued recovery and their gradual return to normal life. The evening news brought fresh developments. Vorexa had issued a formal statement announcing an internal investigation, the suspension of all research involving CX572 and the establishment of a patient support fund for families affected by the unauthorized trials. The statement carefully avoided admitting corporate responsibility, attributing the trials to potential misconduct by certain research personnel, rather than systematic policy. Knox watched the coverage with grim satisfaction. The company was in damage control mode, trying desperately to salvage its reputation and stock price. But the public was not buying it. Social media erupted with calls for criminal charges against Vorexa executives. Medical ethics organizations demanded full disclosure of all research protocols. Politicians from both parties called for congressional hearings on pharmaceutical research practices as he tucked Arlen into bed that night. His son asked a question that caught him off guard. "Are the bad doctors go to jail, Dad?" Knox sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Some of them probably the ones who knew what they were doing was wrong." Arlen nodded solemnly. "Good. So they see not hurt other kids like they hurt me." Knox felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's right, buddy. That's why we fought back. Not just for you, but for all the other kids too." Mary returns to Brook Ridge with a lawyer, trying to play the misled mother card. Sheriff Winstead tells Knox they see not charge her yet. But her public image is wrecked. Parents at school shun her. Even her own family cuts ties. Spring turned to summer. Life in a Halstead household settled into new rhythms. Arlen returned to school full-time. His academic performance gradually improving as the last neurological effects of the CX572 faded. He made new friends, joined the Little League team, began taking guitar lessons, normal childhood activities that had seemed impossible during the worst days of his illness. Knox adjusted his work schedule to be more present, taking on fewer projects, but more carefully selected ones that allowed him to maintain his income while spending more time with Arlen. They camped on weekends, built model airplanes together, read the same books, so they could discuss the stories, creating the kind of father-son bond that Knox had always wanted, but that had sometimes been overshadowed by work and attentions in his marriage. Turns out Mira had been embezzling trial funds. To avoid federal prison, she turns on Mary, giving prosecutors the final evidence they need. Mary is arrested for child endangerment, fraud, and falsifying medical consent. "We've been approached by a reporter," Frank said, without preamble. "Eliza Chun from the Portland Investigator. She's been researching Varexa for months, looking into their research practices. Your case broke the dam, Knox. She's got sources inside the company willing to talk now that Myrick's gone." "What does she want exactly?" "An exclusive. Your story, how you discovered what was happening to Arlen, how you fought back against Varexa, how you exposed their legal trials. In return, she's willing to share what her inside sources have told her about Myrick and the company's leadership." "I do not want Arlen identified," Knox said immediately, "or photographed. This is not about him becoming the face of some scandal." "Of course," Frank agreed. "She's willing to work within any parameters we set." "But Knox, this could be powerful. Your story, combined with her insider information, could ensure that Varexa ca not bury this or escape with a slap on the wrist." Knox thought about all the other children who had been subjected to Myrick's experiments, the families who had been manipulated or coerced into participation, the system that had failed to protect the most vulnerable. "Set up," he decided. "But not an interview. I'll provide documentation, emails, medical records, the evidence we've gathered. She can use it all, but I'm not putting my face out there." 3 days later, the Portland Investigator published a devastating expose. "Children used in secret drug trials, Oregon families betrayed." The article detailed Varexa's systematic program of unauthorized experiments, the recruitment of financially vulnerable families, the falsification of consent forms, and the cover-up of dangerous side effects. The most damning revelation came when Mira Gentry, facing serious criminal charges, decided to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony implicated not only Myrick, but the entire executive team of Varexa, and most devastatingly for Mary, revealed that she had been far more involved than anyone had suspected. According to Mira, Mary had not merely enrolled Arlen in the trial for money. She had actively helped recruit other families, identifying vulnerable children at Arlen's school, whose parents might be susceptible to financial incentives. She had participated in discussions about dosage adjustments, despite being fully informed of the risks. And she had personally falsified multiple consent forms, not just Knox's. Even more damning, Mary had been embezzling funds from the trial payments, skimming additional money that was meant for other families. This financial fraud, combined with her knowing endangerment of multiple children, resulted in her arrest on a host of serious charges. Knox is awarded sole custody. He sues Varexa privately, wins a settlement, and donates most of it anonymously to families affected by similar unethical trials. He rebuilds his home with Arlen brick by brick, tighter than ever. 3 months after Judge Harris' final custody ruling, Knox had in Frank's office reviewing the settlement offer for Varexa's attorneys. The company, its reputation in tatters and its legal position untenable, had proposed a substantial financial package to resolve the civil suits brought by the families of all 23 children identified in the CX 572 trials. Knox studied the numbers carefully. The total settlement pool was enormous, over $100 million to be divided among the affected families based on documented harm, with Arlen's case specifically recognized due to Knox's role in exposing the entire operation. "Is it fair?" Knox asked, thinking not of the money itself, but of what it represented: accountability, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a deterrent to other companies that might consider similar exploitation. "It's more than fair," Frank assured him. "Combined with the criminal penalties and regulatory fines, this will effectively end Varexa as we know it. They'll likely sell off whatever viable research remains and dissolve the company. And the individual compensation for each family is substantial enough to cover all medical expenses, therapy, future care needs, and still provide for education and other opportunities." Knox nodded slowly. It was not about enriching himself. It had never been about money. It was about justice, about ensuring that those responsible faced consequences proportionate to the harm they had caused. Later that week, Knox signed the settlement agreement. The terms were confidential, but the impact was immediately apparent. Most of the money designated for Arlen went into a trust for his education and future needs. But Knox did allocate a significant portion to a purpose that felt right: of donation to fund research into safe, effective treatments for children with neurological conditions conducted with proper oversight and ethical protocols. Knox sits on the porch as Arlen builds a model airplane nearby, smiling for the first time in weeks. Tom joins them with coffee. You did it, Tom says. No, Knox replies. We did it. But I'm never letting my guard down again. Arlen looks up, beaming. Dad, my head does not hurt anymore. Knox pulls his son into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the resilience and clarity this 8-year-old boy displayed in the face of such profound betrayal. I know, buddy, he whispers, his voice thick with emotion. I know. And in that moment, watching his son's face illuminate with happiness, Knox knew it was true. Not just the physical pain, but the deeper wounds of betrayal and exploitation were healing. The future stretched before them, unwritten but full of possibility, no longer shadowed by the nightmare they had survived together. They had won not just a legal victory, not just financial compensation, but the far more precious victory of reclaimed health, of justice served, of a life rebuilt on stronger foundations. Knox held his son close, meeting Tom's understanding gaze over Arlen's head. The battle was over. The healing had begun. And whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, father and son, bound not just by blood, but by the unbreakable bond forged in their shared triumph over those who had sought to harm them.